Good morning and welcome everyone. I am glad to see our community back online for the next 2 days of a very inspiring conference. But first, our former CEO Cedric Thomas and our new CEO Pierre-Yves Gibello will open officially this OW2con'22. They will recap for us the last 15 years of open source initiatives and achievements at OW2, and they will present in more details the agenda for the next 2 days, focusing on predictable and reliable open source software. Cedric, Pierre-Yves, the floor is yours.
Hello, I'm Pierre-Yves Gibello, the new CEO of OW2, coming after Cedric Thomas. Now we are 15 years old, and it's time for Cedric and myself to dig into the long and rich history of OW2 across the ages. Well, in fact I'm not so new in the story. I was already a speaker at an event called OW2con' in 2005. In 1999, 23 years ago, OW2's ancestor, OW2 was created to put some open source projects in common. I had an open source project of my own, so I was proposed to join, and I was there at the beginning of the adventure. Note that 2 of the 3 initial members are still there, INRIA and France Telecom, now called Orange. The community spirit was already there, with a co-opted governance based on goodwill. So we held friendly and animated meetings. Everyone was a board member. There were no elections. Rapidly, OW2 met an unexpected success, with many projects and companies joining us, an enthusiastic press coverage and a warm support from a growing community of members. After a few years, it became obvious that we had to organize ourselves. In 2006, Cedric Thomas was hired by OW2 as a consultant. With one question: do we continue or stop? And if we continue, how can we do that? Cedric started writing a plan, then realized the plan perfectly fit his own dreams. He believed open source would change the world, and was surprised to discover a European outsider being part of the race. So, he closed his consultancy company and became the first CEO of version 2 of OW2, called OW2 in 2007. I also joined the new OW2 with my own company, then sat on the board for 10 years as an elected representative. But the subject is OW2, not me. Our 15th anniversary timeline starts now. 2007, OW2 is born. Then who can tell what happened better than Cedric? Cedric, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pierre-Yves. And good morning to you all. Well, it has been a pleasure and a privilege to launch and lead OW2 over the past 15 years, and also to meet and work with so many inspiring people in the open source ecosystem. It has been an extraordinary journey, and collectively, we can be proud of the management office, the board of directors, the members, and as a community of what we have achieved at OW2. Of course, compared to larger and better financed open source organizations, OW2 is still a niche player. But during this period, we have carved our niche, and OW2 became globally recognized. And as an organization and a community, we have made real contribution to the growth and recognition of open source software, especially in Europe. And I'm sure you must be aware of what a challenging effort it must have been, especially in an environment that is not intuitive for outsiders, and even sometimes for ourselves. And this for 3 key reasons. First of all, open source software is not monolithic. It is driven by different and sometimes antagonistic models. I have given many descriptions of my analysis of the changing nature of open source and its four models. The ethical developer, the disruptive entrepreneur, the collaborative technocratic innovator, and the industry capitalist. These models coexist and often interact with each other, which makes the open source ecosystem complex to understand. Then, the real value of open source is indirect. Open source software represents something like 10 to 15% of the software and services industry. So its direct economic value is relatively minor. The real value of open source software comes from its cultural and technical impact and what economists call externalities. For example, open source prevents the formation of monopolies, which is good for users. It facilitates the creation of good quality jobs that are not easy to transfer offshore. And open source is more and more a driver of digital sovereignty. The third reason is that we have been witnessing a radical change in demand. As open source becomes more mainstream and is adopted in all sectors of the economy, we increasingly address decision makers that are no longer free software supporters or activists, and not even project contributors. And they are more and more conventional business managers that want products, or at least code with what I call products attributes that make it business ready. So this is our context. And add to that not everyone really understands what we do at OW2. Well, in this environment, our mission is really to promote a code base of open source software. But as we've always said, open source is not only about code and technology, it is about people and their values. And what we really do at OW2 is bring people together. And how do we do that? Well, we address two markets. Well, we like to think of OW2 as a community platform addressing two markets. We bring together developers, project leaders, innovative SMEs on one hand, and we reach out to users on the other. And how do we do that? Well, by leveraging our three-layer platform, comprising a state-of-the-art technical infrastructure, open source of course, a governance system, and a set of marketing opportunities. It has been a super interesting job to monitor the evolution of this environment and to adapt our platform to these evolutions. And of course, OW2 today is very different from what it was 15 years ago. Most of the project inherited with a code base of open source middleware that were assembled by ObjectWeb went into archive. Only the best projects have survived, and today our code base is mainly focused on open source software solutions for corporate information systems. We have a great portfolio of some 25-30 enterprise-ready open source projects, of which we can be very, very proud. And we must be very grateful to our members and the project leaders that have assembled such an extraordinary free resource. And still adapting to the evolution of our environment, we have launched in the past 2 to 3 years 2 strategic initiatives in the open source world to support our project and our mission to promote this code base. The market readiness methodology and the good governance initiative. Think of the market readiness level methodology as a push side effort. We help our projects to become more market oriented and enterprise ready. And think of the good governance initiative as a pull side effort, where we help mainstream companies be more comfortable and professional in their adoption of our open source software. Admittedly, both the market readiness level methodology and the good governance initiatives are in their early stage. They may have been validated by experience, but they still require determined efforts to grow and become mainstream. So it is now up to Pierre-Yves Gibello to work with the board of directors to define OW2 next priorities. We've had long discussions on this subject, and we are totally aligned as to what is essential and unique to OW2. OW2 must remain true to its values, the four freedoms, our transparency, and our independence. Collectively, and as a community, what we do is ride the wave of open source software to grow commons that create good quality jobs and value for the whole economy. Now, OW2 must ensure its sustainability, and that goes through the growth of its membership and probably also the participation in publicly funded projects thanks to its technical infrastructure and its community and communication expertise. So for the next few years, we see OW2 developing mainly in Europe, while being open, of course, to any relevant global opportunity. So, as I must move on, I would like to thank you all for your participation in OW2 and your extraordinary ongoing support during these 15 years. I'm very happy to hand over to Pierre-Yves Gibello. He has all the right skills and experience to run the organization and to continue the development of OW2. I would like to congratulate him and wish him and you all the best of luck to keep OW2 thriving. And with that, the floor is yours, Pierre-Yves.
Thank you, Cedric. Thanks for all, as you designed OW2 and led it where it is today. A proven, open and democratic governance model, with our board, president and technical council playing their roles. A seasoned and faithful team, a rock-solid open-source infrastructure, and a supportive community, with members staying for years, some from the beginning. Since the initial open-source middleware, many renowned professional solutions joined our codebase. Some a long time ago, like Sempa, LimonLDAP, Lutes, BlueMind or Rocket Chat. Others more recently, like Prestashop or Centreon. So, OW2 has the roots it needs to keep growing independently at its own pace. Of course, OW2 has many challenges ahead. Some are tactical, like recruiting new members, promoting flagship projects, and maintaining a sufficient level of public funding without hampering our operations nor betraying our values. But most of them are strategic or even political. Open source is strategic and must become central for professional organizations. We have to convince them to engage, not just reuse. That's the meaning of Good Governance Initiative and OSPO Alliance. That users become part of the game, contribute, push open source on the fast lane, and will be there paving their road to success, providing methods and tools they need, like we do with our so promising MRL methodology. Open source is a political stake. It is about digital sovereignty, ecology on commons, local employment, knowledge, open science, open data, cooperation. Our bylaws make OW2 a non-profit acting for public interest. We have to accept ourselves as an actor of social economy with responsibilities in helping build a better society from the ground. And it's our mission to convince even big companies and institutions that social economy and open source are already on their agenda. Of course, Cedric leaving OW2 is a big change. I have to take over after the economist and strategist he was, as the engineer and open source developer I am. Being part of OW2 history from the start, I will not engage a revolution, but need to cope with my own strengths and weaknesses, and my own beliefs and values. And though I'm very proud of being there, I'm somewhat frightened as well. But as said Muhammad Ali, if your dreams don't scare you, they aren't big enough. Hoping OW2 is on its way to make its journey a destiny, I would like to thank beyond Cedric, all our faithful members, sponsors, team, all the people and organizations who made it possible. And I declare OW2con'22 officially open.
Thank you and welcome back. Julien Mathis, co-founder and CEO of the fast-growing Centreon software company, is focused on always-on operations and performance excellence. Julien is joining us for a short keynote entitled Combining the Spirit of Open Source with Business Realities, a Never-Ended Journey. It's our great pleasure to welcome you, Julien. Let's start the journey now.
Hi, thanks for being connected today. My name is Julien Mathis and I'm co-founder and CEO of Centreon, a French software company specialized in IT monitoring. I'm also one of the two students who created Centreon, the open source project, in 2003. And 17 years later, this open source software is still at the heart of our monitoring platform. The difference is that we have now 140 employees, 850 customers, and at the same time, we estimate the community around 250,000 of users for the open source software today. We are a French-based company in Paris and Toulouse, but we also opened last year some offices outside of France, in Luxembourg, in Switzerland, in Canada, where we have a team in Toronto, in UK, and finally in Italy, where we opened an office last month. We have 850 customers in all markets, all verticals, and in 60 countries. Our customers have the same common point. They need to have an IT operations at their full potential. The world runs on IT today. If you have no IT, you have no business. Today, IT operations support businesses, and Centreon gives the possibility to build a control tower to follow the performance of its IT team. So, majority of the company now need to have this kind of functionalities, a kind of solution. When you asked me if I want to share my experience today, I was really surprised, but I thought also that the history of Centreon could be quite interesting because we made some choices totally original today. We develop a company by taking our time at the beginning with an ethical open source DNA, and we have without raising funds, and so with a profitable growth. When I see the pace of the fundraising today, I wonder if I'm not totally old-fashioned, but we can tell now that we are in the rhythm of many scale-up with more than 55% of growth last year. So we can do it. During this 15 minutes, next 15 minutes, I want to tell you about six episodes that we went through trying to find the right balance between the spirit of open source that we love so much and the realities of paying rents, hiring talents, invest in innovation, what we call economic realities. So the first episode was the path from a student project to a company creation. So in 2005, we are 2 students at Epitech with Romain Lemerlu and myself, and we created an open source project. We aims to drive the Nagios reference open source monitoring tool. We made another choice to take the same approach that the founder of Nagios, and therefore to distribute it under the open source license, what the GPL v2. GitHub does not exist at this moment, and so we distribute our software on our user forum and on SourceForge. And we start with very few resources at the time because we were just students. But we are very happy to see many contributions coming from all over the world, and we can tell that this point is very that on that point the open source is very magical. We are involved in the project without really knowing what we would do with it, but we are very motivated. Quickly, we see that our project is used massively in many companies and in public services. So rapidly, we see that it's mandatory to create a company to provide services around the product. And so in 2005, we created a consulting company named Mathis for Merlu and Mathis for helping users to deploy Centreon in a professional context. As you can see at this moment, having a company with the same name that the open source project is not smart, is not fair, is not good enough for many people. So we decided to have a different name and also to blur the lines. And it was our main business activity during the first 10 years, services around the open source product. It was the first step for Centreon. So, episode 2, we decided to create a company. So, we sell services. We develop at night and help users during the day, but we like the challenge. It was very fun. One day, a big company called us and bought 140 days of professional services for specific developments. And specific developments are completely compatible with open source because they pay for developing open source code, and we push, at the end of the project, the code in the core. So it's a kind of contribution, but it's kind of so sponsoring for the open source version. And it's magical. The kind of project helps us to massively improve the product and put them on the market. The only one thing that we have to manage is the governance of the roadmap, because we do not accept specific development if they don't fit with the global interest of the community. And so if the code, the specific development is not in the good way for the community, we can do some modules that we give to the customer in order to just manage the new functionalities separately. During the first 10 years, we managed that point without any problems. Finally, users were quite happy to see that companies who use Centreon can also help to develop it. And also, when you are a company and you invest in a specific development, and you see that another company invests also to improve your own specific development, you are quite very easy. The business model was fair for everybody and very compatible with open source organization. The only thing we have to communicate on this for this activity is to explain some choice and focus that we made, because many choices were done with the company sponsorship focus. So it's quite difficult to understand for the community, but it works. And we all the time try to be very transparent with the community on that point. It was very, very important at this moment. Episode 3, a very important step for us, and technologically very important for our product. Since the beginning, Centreon is using Nagios to collect the information around monitoring. And we know that we cannot collaborate easily with the Nagios team. We don't have access to the Git, and we can not push evolution on that point. It was very hard also to communicate with them because they are not in France. They don't want to communicate with us. And so it's quite difficult. Around 2009, we are about 20 people in the team, and we start to deliver very strong project with Nagios and Centreon, and we are faced with performance and operation problems. We are sometimes also suffering from a lack of functionalities because Nagios focus on the new UI and not on the core. So we decided to do some patches for fixing and improving Nagios, but Nagios team never accept them, and without clear reasons. So we decided to buy support to pay for them, and they don't accept to help us. So we decided. We see that we are faced with a huge problem. We cannot collaborate, and we have a major lock for the future. We cannot do some evolution on the core. In fact, we were in competition. They are currently at this moment developing their user interface, and we have the user interface. And we want to make some evolution on the core, on the collecting engine, and they don't focus on that element at this moment. So we decided to fork. Oh, sorry. So we decided to fork, and we take the sources of Nagios and invest a lot on that point. We hire 2 C++ developers, invest 5 months of development, and increase the performance of the collection engine by 15 times. The fork was clearly welcomed by customers and users, and that gave us the possibility to innovate more on that point. And we added so many new functionalities. And today it's still a very good differentiator for us. We have 600 plugin packs, connectors, and we can monitor everything when we arrive in a new customer. So it's a very important element for us. Moreover, we change also the global image of the company. Before, we are just an add-on of Nagios, and now we are a full-fledged monitoring solution. This was a very important change for the company and for our ambition plan. Episode 4, giving premium extension to our customer. During the first 10 years, the company is growing years and years, but we have a very important list of competitors that is growing every day. These competitors are system integrators because we did services. It's a good news because they distribute Centreon in the majority of the time in France, and we compete with them. And also we are able to do some consulting on it. So maybe you have to find the way to work with them. And the problem is that they are stronger than us because the majority of the time they already have many customers, and in the majority of the time also they have a larger team of sales and marketing. And so the competition was quite hard for us. Maybe you have to think about converting this kind of competitor as partners because it's very important for the development of the company in the future. So we decided in 2011 to make some choice to differentiate ourselves from other services company. We continue to sell service, but we decided to develop also proprietary extension dedicated the first time to our own customer. And we distribute it for free. It's just for the first step of development. We distribute the modules, and we try to find the good fit with the market. This is not in a contradiction with the open source model, as this moment reinforced our position of software editor, software company. Nevertheless, we have to explain this approach to our community because it's extremely important to not give them the feeling that Centreon will be one day a closed source solution. When we decided that the extension were enough valuable, we start to sell it to our customer, but also to customers of system integrators. And so system integrators became partners. This was the start of the next step. It was the open core business model that we start in 2015. In 2015, we are around 65 people, And we decided to change the name of the company. We fully assume our position as an open source monitoring solution provider. And from there begin a very different story for Centreon. One brand, one communication, and one marketing strategy. We sell open source add-ons as well as maintenance contracts. And in the same time, we adopted a subscription model for some of connector packs, the plugin packs. This change allows us to change of dimensions. We go from growth of 20% per year to 30-45% of growth. Despite an acceleration of our business model of selling by selling paying modules, we work more than ever on the open source part because it's a base of everything, and we have to the monitoring the open source part have to be very efficient for us. So 60% of the R&D are invested, are dedicated to the open source part today. Episode 6, the last one. It's navigating cloud to the cloud paradigm with the cloud paradigm. In 2020, we decided to push Centreon into the cloud. Customer asked us for that, so we have to work on that. We create a dedicated team in charge of reviewing our architecture and integrating Centreon in the cloud. We started 2 years after, in 2022, with a big activation plan towards the cloud and with a strong partnership with Amazon Web Services. For the moment, the feedbacks are very positive from users and from the community. We are now targeting 15% of our revenue in the cloud in 2025. However, we need to find the right balance between business and community. We still want to remain open source, to animate our community, to discover contributors every day. And in the same time, we want to bring to our customer a new offer that is easy to access and at the more interesting cost than on-premise, if you consider the indirect cost, of course. This transformation will also allow us to reach a new market where users are not hyper expert, not like today, and where they want to have a really simple solution. Our solution to all of this is to let the choice to use the products as they want. Centreon is cloud and on-premise. So now users can choose between the cloud and on-premise, and we want to continue like that. We switched Centreon as a PLG company, product-led growth. Everything is oriented around the product, and we have to change a lot of things in order to convert directly users to customers. We have to deliver product with a very low-touch approach regarding the sales team. For that, we have to improve a lot of things in the customer journey, documentations, training, setup, and the last point, the try and buy, because we don't have try and buy today. So we have to change a lot of things to install a lot of things around try and buy. It's a very similar method as the one we used to develop the company since the beginning, but with more leverage. So the community is still a high priority to Centreon today, and we want to continue to invest on that. We just launched a new platform, the watch.centreon.com, in order to focus on many activities around the community. It's a never-ending story. Now it's the second season is starting. The cloud is a complete paradigm shift and a great opportunity for Centreon to continue to grow and reinvent its business model. New challenges are now opening up for us. If you want, I can give you some example. The first one is partner first. We work with partner, but we have to maximize our activities through partners. English first. You can see today that is not a very subject where a huge subject in a French company, but we try to switch the company as an English first company. Product-led growth. We have to continue to push on that subject. It's key for the future. And finally, another subject is the fundraising. what could we do if we had more financial capabilities to develop the company? This is a question that we try to answer. We are still free, and I think it's very important for the governance of an open source project. But I think with more capabilities, we can do much better for the future. To conclude, what can I say? It's that I never regret the choice of the open source model. As such, when I was a developer at the beginning, and as today, when I'm no longer in the technical field, but I discover daily users in many companies all over the world with more or less crazy uses of Centreon, and sometimes with more than 10 years of use. So it's magical. We convert our business model years and years to finally earn money with our main activities. The projects had never been so strong than today. If I have something to change, maybe to change faster between the each steps. I think it's possible today. A company can develop an open source project, doing business with it, and have the same name. So it's more powerful for the company developments. But at the beginning, it was quite tricky and to assume that. So I hope it helps you. Thanks for hearing me today. I wish you a very good moment at the OW2 conference. Bye-bye.
Our next talk is from Fabien Vallon, open source lead product manager at Prestashop. Prestashop is a recent OW2 member, but also a well-known marketplace builder. In his talk, Fabien recommends separating your open source project from your company to foster ecosystem and increase contribution. Up to you, Fabien.
Hello everyone, my name is Fabien Vallon and I'm the open source lead product manager at Prestashop. A few words about myself. After 10 years working from IT services startup such as Alcove or business units such Devo team, specialized in open source software integration and development, I worked 7 years as head of product in open source based products and finally joined Prestashop 6 months ago. I will present to you today different aspects of the vision of Prestashop open source project. Regarding the agenda, we will be looking at the development experience and the e-commerce open source vision. The separation of the open source project from the company will be showcased to you through a timeline and challenge we are currently facing, including technical challenges, tooling, as well as legal issue and governance question. After a few words about Prestashop, I will share with you the open source Prestashop project vision and the why of the open source business separation. Then I will present to you some of the challenges we face to achieve this separation. You should know that this separation is not yet completed and still in work in progress. About Prestashop. Prestashop is an e-commerce solution. It publishes an open source software which is freely downloadable and allow you to create an online store. Prestashop also develops modules such as checkouts, metrics, Google Marketing, and some services such as training and support that complements the main core solution. Prestashop is designed to integrate with all the tools needed to run a company. A few words about Prestashop in figure. Prestashop was created in 2007, and the first version was released one year later. The The company allows ambitious entrepreneurs and organizations to create and develop their own e-commerce sites. In 2009, the add-on marketplace was created. At this point, e-commerce store grew fast and Prestashop gained a lot of visibility as well as open source awards, like the best e-commerce solution or the best business solution in 2011. At the same time, the business part also grew in the Prestashop ecosystem. For example, the Prestashop Academy in 2018, or their own add-ons like Checkout, which is a billing solution, or Metrics, or marketing with Facebook, marketing with Google, which are modules that allow you to publish on the marketplace, the Facebook marketplace and the Google marketplace. Despite this success, the open source community grew, but not as fast as the business did. Why? Probably because the community became mistrustful, or in other words, we were unable to give the community enough confidence in the open source nature of Prestashop. A lot of people in the Prestashop ecosystem consider Prestashop as a service or a business company rather than an open source software. To clarify these statements, we decided to separate open source from the company and join the OW2 Foundation this year. Why? We want to improve the platform so Prestashop could become even better software. And second, to grow the community and free the initiatives, both for business, not only from Prestashop Corporation, but also from other companies, and also from open source initiative around the open source Prestashop platform. We also want to improve open source visibility. What is the open source vision of this project? We want to become the e-commerce open source development platform with the best development experience. And enter a virtuous circle. This means increasing the quality of the experience of this development platform should increase the developer ecosystem, business or open source, that could become contributors to this platform, and so on, increasing the quality of the platform. Becoming the e-commerce open source development platform with the best development experience is based on 4 pillars. First, reliability. Everyone needs a stable platform, from the end user customer to the merchant to the developer. Sorry about that. Sorry about the mics. Performance and scalability to improve user experience without slowdown or make it easier to integrate Prestashop into, for example, cloud or SaaS services. Modularity. Well, Prestashop is already very modular, but I think we can improve it. We also need to find the right balance between reliability and modularity. And finally, improve developer experience with better documentation, such as functional documentation, developer documentation, design system, and developer tools, such as debugger and so on. The separation is done in 3 big steps. First, the technical separation with the version 8 of Prestashop. The code will freeze end of May and should be released end of August, we hope. Integration in the foundation this year, this foundation being OW2, of course. And also define governance with the community and the open source strategy this year. Separating the open source project from the company is a big challenge. I'm listing here some of the challenges we faced. Tech, tooling, legal, and governance. Technical challenge first. There is definitely a technical challenge because through the years, the open source and business part were more and more closely mixed together. For example, the open source modules or add-ons distribution was done by the company marketplace. Same for the online app or some of the Prestashop company advertising. It was closely integrated into the Prestashop project. Separating the open source project from the company requires removing this dependency and create an OS open source alternative. This is one, among others, of the goals of the Prestashop version 8, which will be released on August this year. About governance and process. Oh, sorry. Yes. This slide presents the separation of the open source project from the company and also how to get a different governance. For the open source part, the idea, as described earlier, is to grow the community and increase the open source initiative from other companies. What we would like to do is to create a friendly ecosystem and governance for those initiatives. First of all, change the release management. Release should not be a Prestashop decision. And it could be frustrating for the community to release when Prestashop decide to release. Freeze and release on a fixed date is about equity. Each open source initiative and feature, including from Prestashop initiative, but also from other company or individual contribution, could be released on a fixed date. If the feature is ready to release, it will be. Otherwise, it will be on the next slot or release. It's the same rule for all. The second part is to define rules, a kind of contract with the community. We need to define what is good software. For example, with the 4 pillars described earlier, or the several documentation requirements, and so on. The maintainer of the open source projects that are mostly Prestashop right now, but we hope to grow a lot with external maintenance. These maintainers are responsible for this contract. The quality of the software, the quality of the documentation. The initiative from companies or individual people can contribute to the project, referring to this open source contract to add features to this project. They can also contribute to which I call the run, such as pull request reviews, QA, documentation, and so on. Changing this governance and separation rules between open source project and Prestashop Corp, the business part, could be a big change inside the company in terms of culture, in terms of process. This is this could be very challenging for the company. For example, it requires giving some room to this project and accept to not control everything on it. About tooling. Through the years, the open source project use more and more tools from the company. Some example, the localization and documentation software, the designer tools, QA tools, and so on. Separating the open source project from the company requires removing these dependencies and using open source alternatives. We will use probably more and more tools from OW2 for the future release. We also migrated some processes from proprietary tools to open source ones. And for example, we will use Storybook software as a UI UX component explorer. And another challenge is the legal challenge. Well, the two entities have a different legal life. It is necessary to separate them well. And we need to ensure that all documents, code, logo, can be used as part of an open source project. We know that OW2 also provide tools to verify the legal compliance of the code with an open source project. We plan, while it's under study, to review the naming branding to make them completely separate between the two entities. This requires many study from the legal and the departments on this topic. So it's not yet done, but this is under study. I list here some of the challenges you might face when you want to separate operating system from a company. I could also add other challenges such as communication, both for the company and the open source parts. The culture, the different process change inside the company. Well, this is a long journey. It requires support and involvement from the entire company to achieve this. Nothing is fixed, and you have to be ready to question yourself at all the time. The project will evolve further, hopefully boosted by a larger and more diverse community. Thank you for your attention, and I will be pleased to see you next year to talk about the different action we were able to carry out for the separation of the open source project and the company. I also wanted to thank OW2 for organizing this event, which allow us to explain to contributors to the project. With the evolution of the separation of the open source project, we expect an increase in the number of members and activity on our development platforms. Thank you, all of you. Thank you for your time, and wish you a great day for the OW2con'22. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Now, thanks to Miguel Montesinos from Huawei, let us consider the importance of digital sovereignty and technical roadmap control when using software and digital platforms.
Hello everyone, I'm really happy to be here, at least somehow, no? And I really wish this conference I wish you the best of it, no? So you can share, learn, and really it's helpful for you, no? So just to start, I'm gonna do a little game. No, I just want you to take a look at the following and find the difference. No, like spot the difference. And well, probably all of you say, well, there's a huge difference between one thing and another, right? And well, you're quite right. But the thing is, at the end, these two images, these two things, they are just a pile of stones, no? But what's the difference really between them? Because, I mean, there's just a bunch of stones on top of each other. No, but the real difference about here, it's about having a vision, no, having a vision to do something, and actually getting a lot of people and stones together, no? And that is what is really complicated and thrilling, and this is what we do when we are building software solutions, no? At the end, we are just getting some blocks that are already developed, test, and we are sure that they are solid technologies, and we are trying to arrange them to get a higher goal, no? And in the meantime, now we also have to develop new things. So how can we do this? No, and that, I think that's the big question. No, how we can get from little stones to this huge work of art, this monument. No, and well, it's just a matter of work. It's just a matter of having a vision. But the thing is, when we start now, and we already have that, when we start the work, we really find things that slow us down. There's a lot of issues that will come when you approach such huge things. No, well, for example, you all know, and probably more than me, know about licensing. No, that there's a thing about, well, man, you know, this stone has this license, this other stone has this other one, so you cannot use it, or you can use it just in this different way. So this is something you need to take in account when you are building this huge solution. Also, there's a matter of regulations, and well, I mean, at Huawei, well, we know how regulations can really change your life, no? From one day to another, you are able to use or not use something, and it really is a game changer, no? And you need to have different approach, and like the project you had in your mind, just completely changed, no? Another huge thing is standards. I'm sure you're all familiar with different standards, no? Like, well, at the end, what's behind this, no? If you take, for example, why don't we have smart homes, no? Well, by now, I mean, we should have, our house should be like the Jetsons. We should have robots cleaning for us. Everything should be automated. All the cleaning, the heating, everything should work. But there's actually, like, reality is that the standards are owned by different companies, and these companies are owning or pushing for their own standards. So at the end, we have this standard battle that we don't know who is going to win, but the thing is, well, things get slowed down because of this, no? An interest, there's same thing, no? I mean, I come from Spain, and here we have places, cities where you have sun, like 350 days a year. So I think that, I mean, solar power energy should be a thing, like, completely, but you can see there are some interest now, probably, well, the old status quo that is not interested on developing these things, so they put all this legal trouble and laws and everything to, well, push you down, no? Also, when you're trying to build something as huge, it's quite difficult to find the right talent, no? You're trying to do something new, you're trying to make something unique, and it's quite difficult to find all these cross-functional people, managers, designers, developers, to really make something this huge. And that's also, when you finally get them, they need to work together, no? And that's a huge thing, no? How to optimize how they work together, how they build software, no? And well, you know, there's lots of technologies and frameworks and methodologies to do this, but this is quite a thing when you're trying to build something as huge as we are trying, no? And finally, changes, because these projects are gonna, well, span in time, no? That they're not gonna be done in a month or a week, and changes will come, always done. Well, I'm sure you can relate, no? Last 2 years have been crazy, and it seems like everything's changing almost monthly, right? So how can we do to move, no? And I think the solution for this, or one of the solutions, is actually open source, no? And I'm gonna tell you now kind of a true story, no? From Huawei's point, no? Huawei for last couple of years is working in what we call Huawei ecosystem, no? So Huawei is well known for lots of things, and majorly by the smartphone, no, or devices that it's built. But the thing is, it wasn't just that. In order to make something huge, it had to be a full ecosystem around it, no? So the idea was to make not just the hardware, but also the software inside. And you can see there, like, well, the browser, the wallet, health, video, music, maps, everything get into it, and everything developed in-house, no? So in order to rule them all, we actually had like one major stone that was the app gallery, no? App gallery is the app store that will get together all this, where users will be able to find new content, where users will be able to, well, explore, download, and get everything they want in their phones. So this was actually, well, a huge thing, no? How are we gonna build all this? Because, well, it was demanding, no? You had all this technology that is needed, all these servers, and the scope was big, no? Because it was not just about one device, but we were talking about smartphones, we were talking about tablets, TV, wearables. I mean, at some point, even cars are gonna have app gallery, right? So, but at the end, this was just a mall, no, a place. But if you don't have anything that you actually sell or attract the users, there's nothing. So the thing is, where is the content for us? No, what is going to be? No, once I arrive to App Gallery, what is the thing that the users are going to be able to access? No. And one of the major things when you go to downloads on smartphone is actually games, no? So the question was, where are the games, no? And we start thinking about this, and well, it seemed quite easy, no? If you will go and make a little research, you will find that Unity is actually the most popular game engine for mobile games. So around 80% more or less of all mobile games are developed with Unity, right? So there's also like, well, a part of native and then a bunch of other smaller engines, but that will be the thing. So it looked clear that the solution in order to get Unity games, or to order to get games to App Gallery, was to, well, find Unity and make sure that it was compatible, no? Because the thing was here. Okay, Unity works as a game engine, but then we had all these ecosystem, all these mobile services, what we call them. Mobile services are the building blocks, no, of everything that works on your phone. No, they will give you access to the location. They will give you access to push notification, maps, camera possibilities, everything. No, so but Unity is actually, well, a multi-platform solution. No, they try to aim, so they are not specialized. So we needed to fill that gap, no? And in order to do that, it was actually getting some complex technology together, no? It was a huge thing because we have, well, the Unity editor, okay, that is their own technology based on C#, and then we had Java, that is actually the native language that will be used for smartphones development, right? So, and these are two completely different technologies. They work different. They're written different. Everything is, I mean, quite not the same. So, if we wanted to join this together, we needed to make like, well, some kind of translator between both of them, no? And it needed to work both ways, because at the end, you're gonna have like full duplex conversation between the Unity that will take care of all the game and the Java that will take care of all these Huawei mobile services, no? So, okay, it was the thing about technology, but this raised also, I mean, right at the beginning, some red flag, no? Okay, how are we gonna get developers for this, no? Because we have different technologies, different languages, and it's difficult to find somebody that has expertise in all these different things, no? So that was one of the main issues we found. And also another one was to, well, keep up with all the parts that were involved, no? We had Unity, and Unity is really working on, well, getting to be the best, most used game engine. So they practically made a new update every year with different things. They are always trying to improve, like how good games look. No, but also the thing it was, you could use this actually in different OSs. No, you have Windows, Mac, and Linux version for Unity, and you can work on that. And on the other side, we had Huawei that actually, well, it's growing crazy. I mean, Huawei spent so much money in R&D, and so these kits are actually growing yearly. And when I started working on this project, I think we had somewhere around 15 SDKs, and by now we have 69. So it's really complicated. They're doing so many work, so really good work, getting enough new stuff, not just developing all one, but trying to improve, and to create new things. And finally, the scope of this, well, it was also huge. We had tablets, smartphones, TVs, and also this is like a really challenging environment because, as you know, these products, these devices, they keep updating like every month or every few months. You have like the newest one, you have a new OS for them, you have new versions, new screens, new everything, So this was one of the things, but also when you think at it, like working all together, you have like, okay, there's so many possibilities, It's huge. If you get some Unity 2020 version working on a Mac, trying to do this Windows for a TV, and try to imagine like all n times n different choices that we can have here, and it's actually crazy to do all the testing, So at the end you find like, well, it was really a complex thing, and we were trying to see what was the best way to approach. And for us, well, the solution had to come from the people that were actually going to use it. At the end, we needed to set up right the vision, the why of all this, in order to get people on board. So it should be something that we would make a community out of game developer, game studios that were actually looking for more players. They were looking for an alternative game store, trying to go out of the monopoly and get their games to more players, So our way to do that was actually, well, to decide this was going to be an open source project, and it will help us with almost any of the problems we issued. So we did this. I started the project at GitHub. Now it was kind of, well, see how it works, just a proof of concept. But then I saw like, well, there was interest, there was traction. So, and people will join, and people will like it, and people will use it, And for you, these numbers might not be as great, and wow, that's not really that much, but you have to take into account this is like really a niche thing, and it's, grown exponentially from where it started in just a couple years. So, but the thing is, what we accomplish with all this, For me, it's been a huge success going this way because, well, at the end, we managed to game thousands of games are working with this plugin. And if you have a Huawei or even from any Android device, you can download App Gallery, take a look, and you will see like we have some of the most exciting games inside this platform, And this was thanks to the plugin. But this is just not the only thing, It's what we found by going open source. There were also some other benefits, At the end, well, it empowered the vision, the thing that we wanted to make an alternative app store. We wanted to give choice to developers, we wanted to give choice to users, and we wanted to get great content to users. So going this way, we see that was like the right way to go, Also, a big thing, when we were approaching people is, well, they have their games, they do have a lot of SDKs already inside the things they're building, and they are all redundant. That, well, can I trust your code? Can I check it? What if something goes wrong? What if it doesn't? Because every game is different, every company does things differently, there's not that much of a standard. So the possibility to take a look at the code and see what it works and what it doesn't, it really gives an extra trust to it. And I think that's been a huge success for it to spread like a common solution for game developers. And like other of the things was, like I said, now testing, debugging, and there were so many possibilities. It was huge work for us, and we will get help from well, the contributors, they will help us. Maybe it was just raising bugs or telling this didn't work, but some of them even, I found this change, or some new version of Unity came and I found this problem, and they will do a pull request, they will help us, they will send their solution and join the thing and actually work and put their little stone in our project. So at the end we had better code, more reliable, and better than it was before, right? So finally, we achieved what we wanted. Now the marketplace openness, now developers have a choice to release their games. They have a new way to find now, and that was having that choice and choosing it now if they want it. I think it's quite important when you get some competition and you avoid monopolism. It always makes the whole ecosystem grow, right? So the other important thing was that we will get where should we head from here. We have, like I said, so many different things that we could build, that we could create, so many SDKs that were coming from Huawei, and we were at sometimes it was difficult for us to know what should be the next thing that we should take care or we should introduce to our plugin. And now it's quite easy because we have a community, we have developers that will help us to do that. Like, hey, I'm missing this part or this feature that I've seen that is already there, but it's not in the plugin. Would you help us to get it inside, kind of thing? So actually, right now is the developers, the users of this plugin, the ones that control the technical roadmap. Where do we want to go? Now, it's true, they can help, but at the end, they give us the direction that is actually really important. And finally, I think the sovereignty of everything. This thing started with a set of technologies or companies. We had Unity, we had Huawei, right? But at this moment, I believe that the plugin is much more than that. Now it does not belong to any of them. It's not Unity's or Huawei's. It's a small community of game developers that they have a common goal, and they can work on that together. So are actually growing yearly. And when I started working on this project, I think we had somewhere around 15 SDKs, and by now we have 69. The sovereignty of everything. This thing started with a set of technologies or companies. We had Unity, we had Huawei, right? But at this moment, I believe that the plugin is much more than that. Now it does not belong to any of them. It's not Unity's or Huawei's. It's a small community of game developers that they have a common goal, and they can work on that together. So I really think that going open source was the best we could do to actually reach the original vision, but also to give value to all the parts on this ecosystem, right? So, that will be all. I didn't have much time, but I hope you had an idea. And I mean, if you want to continue talking about this, contribute on our thing here, you have a QR. You can contact us there or find me in LinkedIn. Like I said, Miguel Montesinos from Huawei. Say hi, and we can start any conversation. Thanks a lot. Hope you have a great day.
Our next talk is from Gerardo Lisboa, ESOP chairman of the board. As the president of this OW2 associate organization, he will share useful advices for open source enterprise to enter the international market. His talk is entitled today, Opening Portugal, Doing Business with Open Source in Portugal. Thank you very much for participating in OW2con'22. Gerardo, the floor is yours.
Hello, and welcome to Portugal. My name is Gerardo Lisboa, and I'm going to talk a little bit on how can ESOP help you open your open source business here in Portugal. So first, a little bit about ESOP. We are a private, not-for-profit association of enterprises from the private and the public sector that develop and sell open source solutions or solutions based on open source technologies and also promote them. Our activity, our goals are to promote an open, a dynamic, and fair market for open source here in Portugal. To promote not only the technologies and products, but also the communities behind them, the local communities behind them, and the global communities behind each of these technologies and products. For this reason, we try to act as a bridge, the facilitator between the market and public administration and the open source ecosystem. We organize workshops with the public administration on their use of open source. So what are their needs and what are the open source technologies that are available to them? And most importantly, who are the providers of for those technologies? So who can help them architect, design, install, and support those technologies and give them assurance about using them in our market. We also have an open session every week, a sort of an open mic, where anybody can just come in and into the GT session and ask anything about open source. We have been using them to talk about specific matters like, well, for starters, what is open source and how it's managed, ways to manage these and the different ways and standards that we use, from the OSPOs, the Open Source Program Offices, to the GGI, so the Good Governance Initiative from OW2 and other solutions. And also what's there about standards. We also have quite an extensive working with the government and the parliament on establishing laws about using open standards, having a strategy on open data, and also on trying to define some best practices in acquiring and managing open source technologies in the organizations. And also importantly, we keep a permanent observatory of the public tenders in our markets to make sure that they are fair and treat open source in the same stand as in any other proprietary technology. And we try to connect to as many communities and institutions as possible that can affect and all are part of the open source ecosystem nationally and abroad. And of course, we are affiliated with several international institutions like OW2 and Eclipse and the Linux Foundation. So, for this talk, why should you come to Portugal? Maybe associate our country with leisure time, so the sea, the food, the wine, but the market itself is quite dynamic. And most of our companies are also geared to the export market. So what can you find when you come here? First of all, there's a lot of direct foreign investment. So that means that all sorts of financing options are available if you try to establish yourselves here. Also, in terms of the talent pool, you'll find that we are quite, well, hardworking, so I have been told, but also at ease with the English language and new technology and discovering of new solutions. Something that I'm going to talk a little bit later on. So, and besides this, it's easy to live here, according to the expats. The expats that I've talked with, in terms of not only the quality of life and the weather, but also just easygoing and connecting with your neighbors and the city. One of the important things is also that most of our country is covered with optical fiber. So bandwidth is not an issue, and you're not forced to have your presence in the big urban areas, but you can go into smaller cities, probably with even a better quality of life, maybe close to the sea or to the rivers. So how is the market here? So from our survey of our members last year, so the market is quite accepting open source solutions. We have already several public and private institutions that are actively looking for open source solutions. So the selling point is no longer just the cost reduction, but more of the flexibility. So flexibility in terms of entering the technology, but also how the open source technologies are better changeable to adapt to growing demands and changeable demands. If you recall, the thing about the export market is that you have to adapt to a changing market in several countries at once. And so the flexibility of a technological solution is quite important here. Another thing that's interesting to have in mind is that most of our organizations are now transitioning from local on-premises computing facilities into a cloud offer. That is, until, let's say, 3 years ago, most of the data centers were located in on-premises within the organization's buildings. And now they've come to realize there are gains in letting go of that infrastructure, not only on cost, of course, but also, again, in flexibility, in being able to scale up and down the needs with a cloud offer. So there's a big market opportunity here for this migration, for this transition, in all sorts of aspects, from storage to computing to connectivity to changing even technologies that are better suited for a distributed computing need. Also, and on this idea, taking Miguel talking about the talent pool, this is where our talent pool also comes in, which is the need to know the solution. That is, you'll find that we are the technical worker here is geared to trying to find out the reasons, the context of the solution, and not just accepting a black box. And so that matches quite interesting with the open source principles. And so trying to find better solutions, trying to make a solution more flexible is something that we are, as a community in Portugal, used to have. And so, we are also used to communicate with our peers and with the communities, trying to discuss solutions globally and not just inside small groups. There's also, for those that are locating here, a growing community of events. So these are some of the open source international events that are taking place or took place here in Portugal this year. And there are many more national events with several dimensions. So from big events that are many nationals to small meetups everywhere. We have even lots of meetups that are organized by expats. So they are also bringing in the expat community and better mixing up with the local talent. So you'll be at home, you'll be able to access directly those communities physically, not just virtually. So what can ESOP help you in setting up here? So for starters, we welcome you and to giving you access to the communities. So the business communities, the markets, the open source ecosystem, and also trying to share with you some of the business practices that we have here. But also importantly, we connect also with local chambers of commerce, which there's, I think we have a representation of every country here in terms of chambers of commerce, which are the institutions which know the business, how it's done in your country, and know how it's done in Portugal. And so they are one of the primary helpers also in transitioning you into doing business here in our market. But once you're here, the presence of the other chambers of commerce are also a bridge into entering other markets all around the world. And so you should also consider using Portugal as a gateway into having a global presence. Well, having said this, all I have to do is to welcome you aboard Portugal, and anything you need, just call us. We'll be here to help you. Thank you very much.
We are back online at OW2con'22 with a new track that claims the European ecosystem matters. I'd like to welcome the three speakers contributing to this track this morning: Ludovic Dubost, the CEO of XWiki; Alexander Sander, policy consultant at the Free Software Foundation Europe. But let's start now with Ainali, code-based steward at the Foundation for Public Code.
Hello. Hello. My name is Eric Herman. I am a code-based steward at the Foundation for Public Code. My background is in development. I have been a developer for about 25 years now, I guess. And I've worked on software projects that are collaborative and very large, as well as much smaller open source software projects, and also for one of the top 10 e-commerce sites. So I have some experience in the commercial side of things as well.
My name is Ainali, and I'm also code-based steward at the Foundation for Public Code. I've been working with open content in various ways in all sectors, in private, in non-profit, and in the public sector.
And a question that we get asked at the Foundation is, what is public code? And the way we describe public code is that when public organizations are developing free and open source software with either their own staff or by contracting that out to vendors in order to achieve a public policy, especially if it's in collaboration with other organizations, this is public code. And more we see that essential infrastructure is software. These days, when I go to interact with a government office, I'm very seldom showing up in person at a desk or a window. More often, I am opening my web browser and filling in a web form.
Yes, so policy is more and more implemented to be executed by software, not only by civil servants anymore. And that's why it's sort of turning into infrastructure.
And I'm sure you've heard the expression digital transformation of the public sector. And of course, we see this in all areas of government, small municipalities, national level as well. But when we think about the expectations that we have for something a government website has compared to a commercial website, we require much higher levels of transparency, reliability, accountability. And as a taxpayer, we want to see predictability about when these software projects finish, how much they cost, and increasingly we're seeing concerns about sustainability and even sovereignty.
Yeah,
and
this might seem like a daunting task if you're a small public organization or an administration. If you're a small municipality, how can you take on all of this? And that's why it makes sense, and it's understandable for them as well to collaborate. And especially if you're a municipality, you know that your neighbor has probably exactly the same tasks to solve that you do. And even if there is a municipality in another country, it's probably a very similar task to do it. So it makes sense to collaborate over municipality borders, but also over nationality borders. So that's all what this is about, doing this together collaboratively.
In the open.
In the open.
And the standard for public code is a document that the Foundation for Public Code publishes, and it's currently in draft, and it contains 15 criteria which are set out to describe what is expected of a code base in its community, such that a municipality or another government organization can be confident that they are participating in and can reuse the software as it's developed, that it has the quality and reliability needed to meet those very strict and stringent requirements, those demands that are placed on them above and beyond what they would see from if it were a commercial organization.
And the standard is in English, and that's what we're using when we're reviewing it. But of course, it makes sense to have them in a local version because not everybody is fluent in English. So that's why we opened up for community-provided translations. The first out is Spanish. We have Danish being in a review phase right now, and we hope there is going to be more to follow soon. And if you're interested, you can join us on GitHub here and do translations.
And the 15 requirements that are in here are not requirements that are going to be this great extra burden. If you are a developer working on software today, especially if you're doing it in a public context, these practices are going to be things you're either already doing or you wish you were doing if only you had the time or the managerial support. So there's not much in here that you would be surprised by, or that you would find very novel or new. This is really best practices that we've been doing for a long time. The one area that I think might be new, was new to me anyway, if you come from more commercial or less government, is the inclusion of policy, so that the developers of a code base or the stakeholders of a feature request, they understand the policies which constrain or otherwise influence the needs of this code base.
And that's what sets the standard for public code apart from other engineering guidelines, the inclusion of policy. And it also has an aspect of looking at the different roles that are participating in the community, all the way up from the policymakers to the management who are working with this day to day, and to the developers and designers that actually are building the code base. So there's advice and guidance how they can relate to the different requirements and criteria in the standard.
Indeed. And a key element for success for public code and code bases in their communities is that developers are getting support from their management, that management is operating with a clear mandate from the policymakers, and that there is support top to bottom through all layers. And that is going to mean you're much more likely to have a successful project. And that's why the standard includes guidance for all of these different roles.
And when you're applying the standard, it has been a growing understanding from public administrations that it's not only a process, or it's not a product when you're developing something. It's a process, it's continuous. You need to develop it over time. You find out new needs that you have, or that you need to polish and refine the things that you already built to match up with what you want to achieve in the organization with the policy in place. So,
And so the first bullet point you see on the slide here is procuring in increments. And that might be the largest change from the way software's been typically procured for government. Even small municipalities typically put out a tender for the entire package, and then 3 years later have to create a new one because the software has come out of date. And this is much more about creating a ongoing, continuous process, and that is something which is requires some change. So there's going to be some investment, but the change really improves the control and the security, because they have the confidence that the needs as they change will not result in sudden new requirements for giant additional procurement, but instead will be part of the regular learning and adjustment that is familiar to commercial software developers for years, the agile development, bringing some of those ideas into the government space.
This also enables the collaboration from a procurement aspect as well. You don't need to make one big procurement from one organization, so you can make that in small packages from different ones. And setting up your code base and your community for this kind of collaboration, it is an investment, but investments are never free, but it's not a net cost. It will pay in the end. You will get out something that someone else is going to pay for, the development that you wasn't on the top of your priority list, but that is nice to have. And likewise will be the other way, what's on top on your priority list and that you're paying for might come in handy for someone else.
Indeed.
And that's it for the, yeah.
Right. Well, the standard is currently in draft, and we do the development of the standard in the open, just as you would your code bases. And we've had several excellent contributions from members of various public organizations or developers or product owners that work for those vendors. And and we would be happy to have you participate and help us refine and improve the standard.
Yeah, and your contribution does not need to be an actual change or a pull request. You can just come up, give a comment on this does not work for us for this reason or something, so that we know how we can make the standard better to be applicable in your specific situation.
And once a month, we have a video conference call where we invite anybody to join and talk about the way they use the standard or what they would like to see changed in the standard as we continue to evolve it towards 1.0.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ludovic Dubost, and I'm happy to be here at the OW2 conference. I would like to speak to you about the challenges of European digital sovereignty for collaboration software. I'm from XWiki SAS. I'm the founder and creator of XWiki. At XWiki, we create collaboration software for 15 years as open source, both the XWiki and Cryptpad software. We have 50 employees. We're a remote-first company, and we're operating in France, Romania, and recently also have some people in Germany. I've also participated to the ecosystem a lot with the Hub Open Source, at OW2 and CNLL. I'm also in the programming committee for the Open Source Experience Conference at the end of the year. I've been doing speech about the financing of open source software, and recently XWiki is also a member of Eccledia, which is an organization grouping cloud companies that are building technology in Europe. On the subject we're talking about today, what's important to understand is the evolution of technology between 95 and now. We used to buy machines, buy and make software and run it, and we didn't have all the business activities that were dependent on software. Today, we have more and more of the business activities that are dependent on software, but we can also rent cloud servers to run the software that we buy or make, but we can even rent software directly as SaaS on the cloud, and this is creating a few issues. First issue is that at this point we have a big tech imbalance. The tech sector in the US is 10% of the GDP, while in Europe it's only 4%. We're buying a lot of technology from the US, and this is creating a dependency issue. If we look at the sovereignty of different elements in the stack, we see situations that are a bit different. We have more standardized approach at the lower level of the stack. While hardware and semiconductors are mostly built in Asia, it's more standardized, and but we also acquire the material, which means that we can still use it even if we have difficulties. And we also have a very strong actors in Europe, ARM, but not necessarily in all the chip making. On cloud services, we do have national actors in Europe, and there is a lot of standardization and open source, but it's heavily dominated by the US actors. And when we go up the stack, the development stack, there is a lot of open source, but there is also proprietary stack in the path. And while we have local competences for open source, we are more and more dependent on these cloud services that have proprietary elements. And when we go to SaaS, we see that there is a lot of proprietary actors that are built on the cloud path. And while we have national actors, they're very small and they're scattered all around Europe. And one big issue, if we look at the collaboration space, there is a few elements: authentication, mail, calendar, chat, video conferencing, different tools, up to collaboration tools like task management or wikis. First issue we're seeing is the bundling. There is a big strategy of bundling by the cloud providers, which are not only bundling IaaS and PaaS together, but they're also bundling SaaS solutions and collaboration solutions with them. And they actually compete with their own clients that are providing SaaS solutions on top of their IaaS and PaaS. We also see providers bundling the whole collaboration features together, and we see that there is a dependence for other tools which need to connect to the most used collaboration tools, and that reinforces the monopols there. And the lock-in level is very high, especially being SaaS. You can turn it off anytime. The data is controlled by the providers. There is an absolute lack of standards, and there should have been much more regulation in the area, and it's just coming, but not even very advanced. The complexity of the software makes the switch very difficult. We really have a winner-takes-it-all approach that reduces the competition. And lock-in is also meaning unfair business practices. We've seen cloud providers increasing their price or changing what they offer. There's a big risk of lack of sovereignty there. If cloud and dev platforms are stopped, online businesses can stop, but here we're talking about the whole businesses, the whole operations are built on collaboration, and if they're all built on SaaS, you can turn them off in one click, and you have mostly the industry stopping. So we're at a level of dependency that is also as important as energy. Like we need to build independence there, because without sovereignty in the key critical areas and the digital ones in particular, there cannot be political sovereignty. So if we want to have a say in the world as a Europeans, we need also to have the sovereignty there. We've seen in the Ukraine crisis what it meant to be dependent on the Russian gas. There is a thinking that by building our own unicorns we can solve this problem, but the reality is that it doesn't provide sovereignty to all the European countries. If France builds a unicorn, what will Germany consider that unicorn to be? And it's even worse if you're thinking about the small European countries. And the second aspect is that the unicorns are actually massively built on top of the US cloud providers. They're built by design to be bought by them, and that's actually a massive issue of sovereignty. Now, how can open source help in this area? Well, open source can really be a solution to build sovereignty without conflict and to not weaponize technology. It allows to be shared across European. Like we can take open source software from other countries, and we don't have lock-in, and we can even build local competences. We can ask for the local competence to exist. And that means that if there is a shut off of access, then we can continue running the open source software. Open source can really also be a solution to collaboration between local cloud actors and software companies. It also allows to build more on standards versus competing proprietary solution. We can also reuse US solution as long as we build our own competence on top of them as a way to increase our capacity there. There are great EU open source software in many areas. You have in authentication Lemon LDAP, it's an OW2 project, Univention. You have Bluemind, OBM, or Open Exchange. In the file sector, you have PDO, Nextcloud, or CryptPad. The chat, you have Matrix and additional solutions that are not built in Europe, but that have also European specialists, Mattermost, Rocket Chat. Video conferencing solutions like Jitsi, BBB, or Nextcloud Talk. On office editing, only Office or LibreOffice, and in the collaboration space, you have Nextcloud or our solutions at XWiki with XWiki and CryptPad, or a solution like Tulip. Great European initiatives to help support the sector. NGI, Next Generation Internet. At CryptPad, we've been helped by NGI, and want to reach out our thanks to NLNet and to NGI on this. We also have been part of the EU Bug Bounty for open source software with LibreOffice or Odoo. The Gaia X initiative is interesting, but it has also shown some lack of transparency and entry for SMEs, and applications and open source are not that present there, so we need to see how this can change. Euclidia is an initiative that is very interesting to bring actors together. In France, there's been funding for the Suite bureautique, 50 million. That's not specific to open source, but some open source actors are participating to some consortium. We've seen in France that it's difficult to build an open source stack based on French solutions. This is why it's really important to work at the European level. So some of this funding will help, but it won't be sufficient to bring us sovereignty there at the European level. The DNUM has an open source team, and that's really helpful, and that needs to be pushed and continued. Very favorably see the French European presidency of the European Union and the work of the ambassador to the European Union with a working group on commons. It will come up with some results during the month of June, and that's going to be interesting. And our ministry now has the sovereignty in its title, so even though if the ministry has not changed, it changes the mission, and we hope to see more advances in the area. But the best news are coming from Germany, where 50 million euros have been awarded directly to open source. The Centreon for Digital Sovereignty is a great news. The Sovereign Workplace project, Phoenix, is also very interesting, the Sovereign Tech Fund. The Open Source Business Alliance is very active, and it's an organization with whom we should definitely collaborate and help European open source thrive. How can we actually go further? Well, we can go further with more European collaborations and crossing the countries. Open source allows to cross the countries because the code goes there, but we need more collaboration and more help from each other. We need more collaboration with cloud providers. We have yet to find a good model to work with cloud providers, which are great distributors for software and for providers, and we need to find ways to make that work. Open standards is really important. We need regulation that force actors to build on open standards and allow to export the data. We need also to favor the integration of open source solutions, maybe build an open source marketplace to help distribute open source applications more easily. But most importantly, what we need is users and clients. We've seen that some cloud providers can change their pricing, and we at XWiki, we've seen some customers come because of that. And if these customers had come earlier, we would be more advanced, and they wouldn't get the unfair business practices. The earlier we go for open source, which are often the alternative in the end, the better these open source solutions will be, and they will be more standard and more successful. So let's go for these open source collaboration solutions. Let's switch to open source solutions for collaboration, and let's help build the open source sector in Europe in this area. Thank you very much, and I will be able to take questions in the chat, and I hope you have a great conference, and thank you to OW2.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this talk on AI and free software in the European Union. My name is Alexander Sander. I'm working for the Free Software Foundation Europe, and this is a charity that empowers users to control technology, and we do believe that this could be done with the help of free software. And in the next 15 minutes I want to tell you why free software is so important in general, but also specifically in regard to artificial intelligence. And at the moment we are discussing in the European Union how to find ways to put a law in place to regulate AI, artificial intelligence, and by thus we can also set a standard for the world. And that's why it's very important to make sure that free software plays a role in this regulation. And as said, in the next 15 minutes I will tell you why and how to do this. First of all, let me introduce again the concept of free software, also known as open source. So I guess you are all familiar with this, but still to bring us on the same page and in order to make sure we know what we are talking about and why it is so important, I will introduce the 4 freedoms of free software. So first of all, you are free to use the software, you can study the software, you can share it, and you can improve it. So when we have these 4 freedoms, we talk about free software, also known as open source, and this means you are free to use the software for any purpose without any restrictions, any limitations, so you can simply use it. Also, the code is transparent, but thus you can study the code. It can be analyzed by anyone. This is specifically important when we talk about transparency. This is a key debate around AI. But also you are free to share the software without any limitations, and here also the price doesn't matter, so you can earn money with free software, and this is also done. And you are free to improve the software. So this means it can be modified by anyone, and these modifications can be also used by others, so you are giving back to the community by improving the softwares. So others don't have to reinvent the wheel, but can also build on what you have already done. So whenever you have these 4 freedoms to use, study, share and improve, we talk about free software. And I think you already get the idea now why it is so important to use free software in AI. But let's have a closer look on our demands from FSFE and why we think we need free software in AI. So first of all, it's about fundamental rights, right? So we need to make sure that AI, artificial intelligence, respects fundamental rights. There's a huge debate ongoing on how to protect fundamental rights, and I think free software is key in order to make sure that we can protect fundamental rights. In this regard, we want to have transparent, fair and accessible AI. By that we can see what the software is supposed to do. We can see if it respects fundamental rights, but also we can see if it's maybe discriminating, for example. And in the end, I think we all want to have AI in place. We want to use AI and we will use AI, but we need to make sure that it helps us and not restrict us or even worst, interferes with our fundamental rights or discriminate us. And therefore, I said we need free software, because when we have the 4 freedoms, we can see, for example, what the software is supposed to do, and by that we can check if fundamental rights are protected or if a software might discriminate or if it's not fair. And therefore, it's really important that we come up with these demands in a debate and convince decision makers to have a look on the concept of free software and to introduce it in the lawmaking process and make sure we will have it in the law in the end. But also, beside of the fact that it protects fundamental rights, there's another very important point, and it's about innovation, and markets. And if we have transparent code, if we can collaborate and share risks, but expertise, but also costs, then this helps to foster innovation. So first of all, we don't have to reinvent the wheel over and over again, so we can build on what's already out there. And by that, you don't have to start from scratch. But also, it helps us to collaborate with others, to get in touch with other stakeholders, with other persons who are developing AI. And you can exchange views, but you can also exchange code, and also you are free to work together with other stakeholders, not only coders, but also like people from universities who might have good ideas, but also people who have already experience with a specific part of AI and so on. And by that, if we have free software, we can make sure everyone can collaborate, and by that it helps innovation. So we have, on the one hand, the possibility to protect fundamental rights, and on the other hand, to get straightforward with innovation. And that's why I think it's key to use free software when it comes to AI, but for sure also in general. But as we are talking about AI today, let's focus on this. And especially, I think, transparency leads to innovation and trust, and also the possibility to modify and give back to the community. And also we want to have trustworthy AI, not only in respect to fundamental rights, but also that citizens know that the software or that the AI they are using is trustworthy. And therefore, I think we have seen it in the debates around the corona tracing apps, for example, that it is key that people know what they are using, that they are part of the debate, and that they can check if, for example, fundamental rights are protected. And this leads to trust, and by thus people will also use the solutions. And this is also key. I mean, we don't want to have AI out there which is not going to be used, and therefore trust is also very important. And this is a short wrap-up of all the arguments why we need free software. There are also other points like open data, but I think free software plays an important role to make sure that we can protect fundamental rights and guarantee innovation. So the question is, what's going on in the legal process now? So as I said in the very beginning, there is currently a lawmaking process taking place in the European Union. So the EU wants to regulate AI, and therefore, they drafted an AI regulation, also known as AI Act in the media sometimes. And so the current state of play is that the European Commission proposed a text which is now discussed in the European Parliament and in the Council. Unfortunately, in the proposal of the European Commission, free software doesn't play a role, so they don't name it. It's simply not in. So what we need to make sure is that the European Parliament and European Council start to debate around this concept and bring it in, because the European Commission forgot about it. So, and this is actually happening, especially in the European Parliament. Just a few weeks ago, the European Parliament passed a resolution on AI. So this is not legally binding, so this is more like an opinion of the European Parliament. But this opinion now plays a key role also in the debate about the regulation, so the lawmaking process. And in this resolution, the European Parliament said to itself, if one would like to frame it like that, that they want to include the principle of public money, public code in the AI regulation, though it's not fully in line with our PMPC demands. So they said, so whenever it's possible, then we should procure free software when it comes to AI, as administrations, public bodies, and so on. If they are using AI, they should use free software. This is pretty much what we want with our PMPC campaign. We want to go a bit further. We want it everywhere, every time. But still, I think this is a first step in the right direction. And the European Parliament also specifically voted on this, saying to procure free software when it comes to AI. And this found a very huge majority in the European Parliament. So only some ECR and ID MEPs voted against. So this is very conservative and far-right groups. All the others voted in favor of this. So there was an overwhelming strong majority for the principle of procuring free software when public bodies, administrations are using AI to use free software then. Also, there was a reference to the open source strategy of the European Commission. That's why it's a bit strange that the European Commission itself did not include something on free software in the AI regulation, but now the European Parliament wants to introduce this reference as well. So the European Commission, some years ago, now released the open source strategy, where they said they also want to go in the direction of releasing software they are using under free software license. And I think this is then also true for free software. That's why such a reference is needed in the AI Act. And also they acknowledge that if we use free software in terms of AI, then it is good for innovation. So they are mainly following our arguments. So this helped a lot that we already stepped in. some months ago around this debate and start to advocate around the resolution and make sure that these sayings survived and that they found a strong majority. We hope this helps us now also in the debate about the regulation. So we see the European Parliament understood with a huge majority that it is very good for innovation, protecting fundamental rights and procurement procedures to use free software when it comes to AI. So this is at the moment very helpful. And also we have seen the Declaration on Digital Rights. This is also a paper which was proposed by the European Commission. It's not legally binding, but it will lead us as an idea for future lawmaking processes. And in this declaration there are references to other documents like the Berlin Declaration, for example, where we have sayings that free software should play a key role. But the European Parliament now amended to this text and want to make it very clear that free software is important, first of all, in the light of AI. So the European Parliament wants to have a saying in this declaration on the digital rights that free software ensures transparency and that free software and in the use of algorithms and AI is important. And also they are highlighting on a more general level that open standards and open source leads to trust. And I think these arguments are very important, and if they would find, or if they will find their way in the declaration, I think this will be also key for future debates, not only about AI, but in general. So therefore we are also working on the declaration at the moment to make sure that the proposals of the European Parliament survive. There's currently discussion with the Council and the Commission, and then they will, or they want to have before the summer break, they want to have a final text. Let's see if it works out. And we are trying at the moment to make sure that these amendments survive, because first of all, it will help us in the AI regulation to make sure we can convince Council and Parliament to bring in this text, but also for future legislation, as there is a general saying that open source and open standards help to create trust. So the next steps are that the European Parliament will discuss the AI Act, but also the declaration. Same is true for the Council. So both of them are discussing about the regulation. They are trying to amend it. And so therefore it's important to make sure that we bring in the text of the resolution, but also the parts of the declaration I just showed you. So this is happening in the next weeks. And then there will be a huge debate for the upcoming months about the whole file, and the plan is to have a common position, at least of the European Parliament and the Council, by the end of the year, and then they start the trialogue and discuss between the institutions on the final text. And therefore, it would be key if you could support us in this and reach out to decision makers with the mentioned resolution, but also declaration, and ask them to bring in the concept of free software in the regulation as well. And also this could be done on a national level. As said, the Council is also debating about this at the moment. We haven't seen anything from the Council in this regard, so it's also important to work on the national level on this. So whenever you are reaching out to decision makers in your ministries, but also in the country in general, make them aware of the concept of public money, public code. So with our campaign, which is in the meantime supported by more than 30,000 people and a lot of NGOs and also administrations, we want that legislation requires that publicly financed software developed for the public sector be made publicly available under a free software license. This is also true for AI. Feel free to watch on our website, publiccode.eu, to find more arguments on this. And if you haven't signed it so far, feel free to also sign individually or with your organization. And feel free to spread the word, especially when it comes to AI, because I think it's important that we bring in the concept of free software in the AI regulation. With this, I'm going to end this talk. Unfortunately, I won't be there for a Q&A session, but feel free to send me email to further discuss this, or if you have any questions. And else, yeah, thanks for having me here at this conference, and I wish you a very nice ongoing conference, and hopefully we see each other yeah, next year in person. With this, I'm going to thank you. Bye-bye.